Welcome in, everybody, to Fantasy Pros. This is the Fantasy Baseball Podcast. It is me, Joey P. Joe Pizzapia, with me as always as the Welsh, and it's you. And today we're going to talk about the same old thing we talked about all last year, Jacob deGrom's injury. Oh my goodness, are we back again where we started? Let's hope not. But we're also going to talk a lot more about the good things in spring, the risers in our rankings from what we've seen so far from spring performances, and of course, wherever there's risers, there's fallers as well. So we'll be going through some of the guys that maybe had not so good springs, maybe some injury concerns or some other issues have crept up that we've dropped in our rankings. And since we know this is the biggest weekend of MLB drafting there is, we're going to give you a couple of quick little tips at the end to make you smarter, because that's what the Welsh and I do. Welsh, as we were talking before the show, we're getting closer and closer to actual baseball. We're less than a week away now, and I'm getting very excited for the start of the season. How about you?
I was, until I got sick and then Jacob deGrom got hurt. So if there's two constants in the world, is me going down right before all of the big stuff happens and Jacob deGrom hurting his arm again, ruining my draft shares and all that stuff. But no, I am excited. I have a different perspective than a lot of you guys because of spring training. You know, like right. I've been inundated with baseball in person for, a month, getting to see games, getting to be around players, getting to watch practices, getting to see the little things on where guys are going, the players that aren't coming out, all that type of stuff. So my perspective is a little bit different, but of course, getting into games that like really count, gonna be pretty exciting.
No, absolutely. And before we start to break down all those players, I want to remind everybody, if you got your draft coming up this weekend, tonight, doesn't matter. The draft assistant with Sync is there for you to help you at fantasypros.com/draftwizard. So if you're making investments in leagues, you should be investing in the best tools, and we've got them here at Fantasy Pros to help you. I don't understand why you wouldn't want to do this, because they're amazing. So the draft assistant, what it does is it syncs up to your draft, right? It gives you suggestions for picks in real time. It can tell you when a player might last an extra round, if you reached on a player, basically what you've seen from the Draft Wizard as we've been doing shows here too, but a whole lot more. And it syncs up to Yahoo, ESPN, CBS, all the major ones there, and it's got the same interface as the Draft Simulator. So basically, if you're an MVP or a Hall of Fame subscriber here at Fantasy Pros, you have access to the Draft Assistant with Sync. That means you can put the cheat sheets along with it too, so you can pick me and Welsh, or maybe your other favorite. I don't know why you'd have another favorite besides us, but if you have other favorite analysts, you can put them on that cheat sheet too. Every time we make an adjustment to our rankings, we're going to have that cheat sheet updated for you as well. So again, that Draft Assistant with Sync is the best thing you can possibly do in terms of getting prepared and having the best draft you possibly can. And it's only available at fantasypros.com/draftwizard. Also, just a quick reminder too, we've also got that MLB draft kit. Now that's free. So all you people, don't want to spend any money, we've got the free stuff too at fantasypros.com/kit. And you could dominate your draft. We love to dominate our drafts around here with our free MLB draft kit at fantasypros.com/kit. It's loaded with the consensus rankings, the projections, salary cap values. If you're in those formats, you got the cheat sheets you can print out, the sleepers, the bust, the draft strategy, everything. It's all there at fantasypros.com/kit. And don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/fantasyprosmlb, because the Welsh and I, starting on Wednesday, before the season starts, we're going to start, and we're going to start leading off, and it's going to be great. So we want all those peanuts and Cracker Jacks to follow us there, subscribe to the YouTube channel, click that notifications bell so you can join us live, ask questions. If you got funny comments, snarky comments, you'll make the show. We love the interactive piece of that show. And Welsh, you're going to get a chance to really interact with the Peanuts and Cracker Jacks at a high level. Are you excited?
I mean, I interact with crackers and peanut jacks. Peanut jacks?
Crackers and peanut jacks. That's a whole other thing. That's like
I do a lot of interacting
period of
already.
American history. I think we can't do that.
Two notes I wanted to, because you busted through like a ton of stuff there. So it was like, I was waiting to try to like crevice my way in. Two things. I just released my draft cheat sheet that's available, the article in Fantasy Pros. That's part of it. Yours was last week. Mine's there if people want to check that out as a solo article or part of the draft kit. And also, we were doing a mock draft in this league, our final one. We do these mock drafts through January. It's wild. They're a completely different experience than what we do here. And it was our final one. And one of the guys in there, one of our Army members on our In This League Patreon we have, he's a great fantasy guy. And we started to notice, because he'd done a couple mock drafts, we're like, he's projecting out great every single time. And he is a staunch Fantasy Pros guy. And this last one, we finally were like, wait a minute, this is fishy. We haven't gotten to the controversy. We're 100% confident that he was using the draft wizard against us in it because he got a perfect 100 in the mock draft we did in the final one, projected out number 1, and we were like, what the hell's going on here? And it's happened in 2 straight mock drafts.
I can guarantee you he's using the draft assistant.
No, we know he was. He's a Fantasy Pros like hardcore guy, so we know it.
Telling you, I mean, we're not selling stuff here. We're trying to win you stuff. There's a big difference, okay? We're part of this together. All of the peanuts and cracker jacks, not the crackers and the peanut jacks. I don't know who those people are.
Peanut jacks, I said.
Peanut jack. Oh man,
it's been a long week.
You got them peanut jacks, man. I love peanut jacks. I'm so hungry. Blake Snell's hungry after that bad start yesterday.
Oh man, I'm hungry.
All right, let's start with the headlines. And of course, I woke up and it's, I'm old, so I fall asleep at like 10 o'clock. And I woke up this morning and it's April Fool's Day. And I see the Jacob deGrom tweets and I'm like, ha, 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 okay. But no, it's real. He's going for an MRI on his shoulder. He's got some tightness. Now, this could very well be soreness, tightness, and you're just kind of the normal thing that happens to pitchers as they ramp up. But because it's Jacob deGrom, there's hyperventilating going on, and rightfully so, because of everything we saw last year. When he's on the mound, Welsh, he is the best there is. I mean, it's not even like to say he's the best is not fair to the word the best, because he is so dominant. He's so incredible. Even it's kind of like, when he had Derrick Henry, who got hurt last year and he was still like RB 10 or whatever by the end of the season because he was so good. With deGrom, he had a 1.08 ERA last year, a 0.54 whip, which is just nuts. Over 92 innings, struck out 146 guys, walked just 11. I mean, it's absurd. It's disgusting how good he is. So Welsh, going into this weekend now, what do you do with deGrom? How do you approach him from a draft standpoint now that we have this latest news where things are a little bit up in the air?
Here's the benefit to it, because it's a little tough for me because I've been a staunch deGrom guy. I tend to do this. I recognize it, and I think people that listen to me recognize it. These guys that are incredible talents that might have an injury tag around them, I don't like to ding them to the level of even like what was happening with deGrom, where people are like, listen, you can't take, maybe in the 4th round, but you can't take deGrom in the top 5 pitchers, blah, blah, blah. And then as soon as and I called it. It was one of those things I absolutely called. I said, watch what happens when you start seeing him pitch. He's going to go back up to being the top pitcher. He went 2, I think, overall in a main event on NFBC this past weekend. So, the blinders come on. You should recognize it. But my fault is I don't ding him for these type of things because he is so insanely dominant. And I mean, how many times do you see, projected pitchers to have 2.5 ERAs in projections? You don't, because projections follow XFIP and a lot of those factors. He is the best pitcher when he's out there. So to the question, what do? Here's a benefit. MRI is happening here on Friday. You should know what you're getting into on Saturday for the most part. The likely scenario is it's nothing serious. He does not pitch his scheduled start on Saturday, and then they just line him up for the season and no IL stint, and then that's the best case scenario, and I think you move forward with what you were doing. I was never taking deGrom 5th or 6th overall of all players. I loved deGrom before everybody else loved deGrom, and it was popular this year in the 2nd round. That's where I really liked him. There is a risk in the 1st. I don't like taking pitchers in the 1st unless it's a points league in general. So nothing has changed for me. Everybody else has changed from maybe I'll take him in the late 3rd to taking him 5th overall. I still stand where I stand. Now, if it's something where, there's a slight tear and blah, 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 move him down, move him off the board. To be frank, if it's something that he's going to miss a month, he is going to to the point of not even drafting at that point, like maybe really late post 100. But best case scenario, we have answers on Friday following the MRI. We move forward and maybe just don't take him in the 1st. Take him after Cole, take him after Burns, take him in the 2nd, like I was always doing.
It's very frustrating, though, because this is a guy you want to take it as a top 5 pitcher, but there's a chance by the time we get to this weekend's drafts that he's more in the Chris Sale, Lance McCullers, Jack Flaherty bucket than he is in the top 5 pitcher bucket. And that's just a fact. I mean, you just mentioned, what if he does miss 3 months? What if he misses the whole season? You have to weigh that. And I always say this to everybody.
Because he had I didn't mean to interrupt you, but he had like the elbow inflammation, I think it was. And then he also had the UCL stuff last year. So the absolute fear is any of this is tied to that. And this is going to remind people back on the injury.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. So go ahead.
I think the point I make to everybody is this: if you're in a league where you have a heavy financial investment, I'm just not taking the risk. I'm not doing it. There's other approaches. Why put yourself at a deficit? And it's heartbreaking because I know what the upside is. But if you're in a fun league, if you're in a casual league, yeah, this is a great way to have some fun and take a chance if you get a discount. And I assume you're going to get a discount. If he was a pitcher going consistently in the second round, I would think no matter what the MRI tells you, probably even if it's positive, he's going to at least take a 2-round hit. He's going to go in the 4th round or something like that would be my guess for most casual leagues or even
unless he pitches Saturday. If he goes back and he's on his normal schedule and it's
God, that'd be really hard sell for me. I don't know about that. You think
I'm just saying
Saturday?
Well, that's his scheduled start. If he were to go and pitch, just hypothetical, I think he's no longer a for sure first rounder. He's somewhere in the second, maybe late second. Maybe you get a little bit of a discount on him if we go back to a regular scheduled program. Like that's where that would go. But I don't know if that's going to be the case.
All right, let's get back to our regularly scheduled topic here, which is spring risers and fallers. And Welsh, let's start with you. Who's a guy that's rising up your board after spring is now sprung?
Now, this will be a funny one because as a prospect person, you guys know that, especially this specific person I've talked a whole lot about, but I have to admit, I would chastise people in January for taking this guy so high because I didn't see the path. And then you had MLB's agreement on CBA come out, and they have some incentives for prospects to make the roster. Okay, that's a little bit better. Still didn't see the path. This team then made a move to trade for a positional player that this guy would be there. I still didn't see the path. Then I saw this guy in games and saw how the team was treating him on the backfields, and Julio Rodriguez had to skyrocket back up the boards. He wasn't a guy I was drafting early on because I mean, honestly, the team has babied him. There's been a breaking ball kind of thing. He gets a little bit wild, which he showed in a couple of days ago where, he's a young guy, base path running defense. Sometimes it can get just a little bit wild. And I didn't see the need for the team to want to press him. But you now go out. You see how he had some adversity. I think it was on Wednesday. And then Thursday, he comes out and he has an inside the park homer. He's walking. He's 2 for 2. He's a team leader. I've been on the backfields of the Mariners about 4 times over the last 2.5 weeks. He is consistently working with Kellnick, consistently working with Winker. He's with the majors at every point. He's the most physically imposing guy. He's one of the best players that is out there consistently offensively. And it's hard to deny. I don't think the Mariners necessarily are doing it for the extra compensation, but when you get into that 200 range, it is worth taking the risk and the shot on Julio Rodriguez. It looks like he can make the opening day roster. I don't see what they're going to put him down for. Kyle Lewis is hurt. Taylor Trammell has not been playing, by the way. Even healthy, he's all good. They're not playing him in competitive games. I think he's a 4th outfielder. I think Julio makes the roster. He has skyrocketed up the boards. I don't think I'll be the top guy on FantasyPros, but I pushed him up very close into the 200 range, and he's one of the top prospects you should draft. Even though there's no guarantees on him, do it now, because if they were to announce, let's say today, on Friday, coming into the weekend, I don't know when you guys are listening to this, but let's just say hypothetically, Scott Service comes out and says, Julio Rodriguez has made the roster, and he'll be batting 6 for the Mariners this season. I'm not joking you. Julio might go right around 100 overall. I'm serious. I really think he could.
Well, I've got him as a top 50 outfielder already.
Yeah, I think he could get in that range. So that's why you should go, and he has skyrocketed up my board, and spring has done him fantastic favors where most of these guys, it doesn't really do that.
Right, and that's the other thing too. Is we always talk about how certain players spring matters more than others. Other players, it doesn't matter. They can have good springs, bad springs. They are. But to look at the 10 games he's had this spring, 2 home runs, 6 RBI, 9 strikeouts, but he's got 3 walks, 3 stolen bases, hitting 360 with a 429 OBP and the 720 slugging. So the OPS is 1149. So Rodriguez right now, I'm with you. In fact, I'm good with being aggressive on him. And if you have a draft Friday, be very aggressive because, as we're saying, Saturday, when that news changes, if it does change,
if it does,
it's going to be even worse in terms of price tag you're going to have to pay for him. I wouldn't take over in a redraft. I'm not taking him over Jared Walsh yet. I'm not taking him over Hunter Renfroe yet. But right around where you got to start to have that Jesse Winker, Seiya Suzuki kind of conversation, that's where I'm starting to wonder, do I want the upside? And I think it's a fair conversation.
You and I are a little different on that. I just want to point out, Winker is far higher. I mean, you put Winker in the Seiya Suzuki.
I'm worried about the power.
I do not remotely put those two in the same range. But I just want to point out, in our last mock draft, I think Julio went about 175. So I think when 150 hits, you need to start getting on your business. You need to start considering if he's a guy. I think around Verdugo, I think around Carlson, Suzuki's a great example, Adolis Garcia. That's where you need to start considering if you want to be aggressive on him. Rookies are a little bit dangerous, but regardless, this could be, I mean, Julio's running now, so he might steal 15 if he plays all year, and he legit could hit 30. The strikeouts, though, you got to watch, and that's always been the thing I thought, I don't know if they bring him up.
Well, in Roto, I think the power speed combination is tantalizing enough. In points leagues, different story. So I think that's also goes with the caveat. All right, let's go to my guy. First on my list is Tariq Skubal, who's had a wonderful spring so far. If you look at what he's done so far over the 3-game starts, 8 2/3 innings, 13 strikeouts, just 3 walks, just a 1.26 whip. And Skubal's been a guy, came up through the Seattle system, I think. I'm sorry, not the Seattle, through the Detroit system, pardon me, that people have been waiting on kind of in this grouping of the Mannings and the Mises. And Mize has pitched very well also. But I think with Skubal, what you've seen so far is he's gotten hit around the ballpark a little bit. And that's the thing that you want to try to cut back a little bit. Home runs last year, a big problem too. He gave up 35 of them. That's going to be way too many to have success. But I think if you look at what he's doing now, this is very encouraging because he's 25 years old this year. This is where you want to see him after, he's had about 35 starts or so in the big leagues. This is where I think you want to look and take that step forward. It's like, okay, you got your feet wet. Now what's your confidence level? And I think when you're looking at Skubal, this is one of those pitchers we always talk about, good pitchers on bad teams. Yeah, they probably can't help you with wins, but if they can help you with quality start leagues, keep an eye on them. And if they're efficient, that's important. And if they can help you with strikeouts, and Skubal might be able to do a lot of those things. So although he might not get you W's, when you're looking at guys who are undervalued right now, I think he's one of those guys. So Skubal for me is one to keep an eye on. And I've moved him up my board too. I'm not saying that he's, a number 3 starter by any stretch of the means, but I think he is in that conversation now in that top 60-ish range to at least consider. What do you think?
Yeah, it's people forget too. There was a period of time where people started to like Skubal over Casey Mize. And Casey Mize with the big splitter, has always been unique. But Skubal has been, a big 2-punch type of guy, big fastball. Just needed to get right, and I think both of these guys. It's the, Matt Manning throwing in there is also really interesting because at one time he was seen as a top guy, and I think he's kind of moved below those 3. I think it's been very, very encouraging. He was a really intriguing strikeout guy on the back end of this last year. And what's weird is Mize doesn't have like this, and I say secondaries outside of the splitter. He doesn't have overpowering secondaries of that. Matt Manning hasn't really proved to be consistent. Skubal probably is the best strikeout guy here. And, at the end of the day, when we're just trying to piece together a couple of these categories, if you can get strikeouts cheap late, this might be a 9.5, maybe even higher K per 9 type of guy. Detroit's got a few more pieces in there, especially if they let Torque and Riley Green break camp, and they've got Javi Baez in. They might sneak a couple more wins. I wouldn't be surprised to see Tariq Skubal pick up a few more wins as well and be more of an asset. So I like that pick.
All right, let's go to another one of your risers this spring. Welsh, who's on your list?
Now, this is a big name guy, and this is probably a pretty obvious one, but I soured quite a bit coming into this year on Chris Bryant, who I've always loved. Really poorish year. Didn't really seem to have a proper home. The Giants were a question. Where was he going to play? But I can't deny going to Colorado absolutely changed everything. It's almost like the Dumb and Dumber thing, like absolutely, just completely changing through. When I had him, God, man, I had him around. I think
totally redeemed himself.
Yeah, that's
the line you're looking for.
Totally redeemed yourself. He was around the 90s. I mean, I was legit thinking between Anthony Rendon and Chris Bryant, the move to Colorado and the extra love that you're going to get with kind of a crappy position in general. I'm not the biggest Alex Bregman guy. Arenado's fine, but the upside on Bryant to regain that MVP quality in the most hitter-friendly place, even though they all have humidors now, which is interesting, he flew up my board. And I haven't gotten into this territory where people are taking him around 25, 30 overall, which is bonkers on that bet.
Well,
especially,
I think they do it for the position flexibility, which is in the mock we did a couple weeks ago. I did that, and I love the fact that the draft then came to me, and I could go BPA for 3 rounds after and just keep moving him around the diamond. That's a huge – that is worth a little bit of a premium to me. I don't want to overstate it, but the deeper the format you play – the more that becomes a huge asset because it lets the draft then filter to you, and you can keep taking the best talent, just move. I'm going to move to first. Nope. I'm going to move to third. I can move now. I feel like I can move them all over.
I agree, but I think it's more the Colorado. It's just put a hitter who can hit 30 homers in Colorado who's had like Cody Bellinger. Everybody's off on Cody Bellinger right now. Everybody is kind of fading him. This is actually not a guy we'll probably talk about here in a little bit. But imagine Cody Bellinger coming off these bad years and then going into Colorado, what people would do. You would forget. So it's kind of the same thing as Chris Bryant. Chris Bryant has proven to be a better hitter. So I agree. Position flexibility is great. Third base sucks. And put a big bopping hitter in Colorado. All those factors came in. But from a rising perspective, that's it for me. He's really moved up. Plus, I think this team can be aggressive on the base paths, which might be good for players in front for RBI opportunities. There's obviously the Dodgers are incredible. The Padres are fine, though they're a little wonky in their staff. But, you get to play Arizona, you get to play in Colorado. So he has really moved up into that, top 50 range. I don't really love it inside the top 25, but anywhere between 30 and 50, if you want to jump on it, I'm good with it. And he has rocketed up my board.
All right, I'll give you another big name on my list too, since we're doing the big names here, and it's Francisco Lindor, who is, I know, he's had good springs in the past. I get that. I understand that. That's good. That's a positive thing. But after last year, it was such a bad taste in everyone's mouth, and we saw the typical guy signs a big contract in a new place, especially a big market, struggles out of the gate, gets into some media tussle, especially in New York. You had that whole controversy when Baez showed up there with the thumbs down stuff and all that nonsense. But at the end of the year, those people who held on to Francisco Lindor, those people who acquired him, actually ended up getting a benefit there. They stayed true. Eventually, if you were still relevant, Francisco Lindor did perform. And what he's doing right now this spring with 10 hits, 10 RBI, 4 home runs already, hit 400 this spring. He's showing you power. He's got a couple doubles too. He hasn't stolen a base, which is just, I'd like to see him steal a base this spring. That'd be nice. But this was a player a couple years ago, just a year removed, basically, from he's kind of a almost first round talent. And I think we have to buy back in. I think the hype that goes along when you go to a big market team is the adverse that happens too, is when you don't perform well, all of a sudden then people underestimate you and forget, and they want to pile on a little bit because the exposure level is so big on the positives and the failures. And he failed a little bit last year. Let's be honest. I would say 4.5 months of the season was a failure for Francisco Lindor, right? Would you agree with that, Welsh? About right. So Now we're getting to a point with Lindor where if he's got a good spring, if he seems like he's got a good fresh attitude going in there, I think there's a lot more attention on guys like Scherzer right now and some of the other acquisitions than there is necessarily on Lindor. That's all the good things. So Lindor to me is another player that I know say move up because he's already a pretty highly rated player. That's the struggle, kind of like what Welsh is saying. But I've moved him back into that place where I think, you know what? This guy is a second round talent, and you might be able to get him maybe in the third or fourth round.
I think that's round, yeah, man.
Yeah, I mean, I think depending on the depth of your league too. I mean, if you're in a shallow league, he's going a little bit later than he should because people also look at shortstop and it's quote so deep end quote. They're kind of dismissing the talent there, and I think Lindor has another big season potentially in him. But this is a guy with 25 kind of potential.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you because I was always there this spring, digging in on last year. I mean, there's a lot of little worrisome things that were poking out there, but it's one of those anomalies to the pitcher who he was. If you take it over, the COVID year and last year, otherwise this had been a really consistent hitter, a 2020 type of guy, a 5-tool player, if you will, 5-tool shortstop where you get those really needed stolen bases where some of these guys don't, where you're not getting them from Seager and Correa. Baez, you're not getting the batting average for. You got all of that with Lindor. And Lindor, like you said, uniquely could be a first-round talent that you can get in the third or fourth round. And, you know, we've also talked about this before, where a lot of these guys in this new adjustment team period where they change major franchises, they've got some growing pains to learn new divisions, new teammates, just new life, circumstances. Sure. And then they come in and they refine themselves. Machado is an example of that. I think this can be that year for Frankie Lindor. So I have been there with you. I'm totally with it. He was high pre-spring, and I'm still there, and I'm excited. I'm excited to try to draft him actually this weekend. I don't know if I have a ton of shares.
Well, I don't have any yet. I haven't really gotten a chance to take him. He's going as the 9th shortstop off the board right now. I would take him over Tatis right now. I think I would take him in a 5x5 over Wander Franco. I would take him over Trevor Story personally. I think he is the conversation with Tim Anderson. If you want to have that one, that's fine. But I think he's, maybe safer than Marcus Semien coming off that career year. You can make the argument that Lindor is the 3rd or 4th shortstop in fantasy. You can make that argument because
you can definitely make the
argument.
Yeah. The problem is there's also the problem with that position. There's this clump of all these great guys that I don't even like to sit here and have this argument of like this guy over this guy, because literally within a 10-pick range, I think you're looking at Tim Anderson, Trevor Story, Wander Franco, Francisco Lindor, Xander Bogaerts, and you're looking at all those guys, and you can pick and choose. It's create your own adventure with whatever shortstop you want, where it's like, hey, I get second base eligibility with Trevor Story at some point, or I'm going to get the stolen bases here, or I'm going to get better batting average with Franco. So you can build the stories of all of those guys, but it also kind of muddies that position a little bit. Why I probably don't have the shares, because there's so many guys, and there's guys later like we've talked about with the Willie Adames or the Brandon Crawfords, even super late, or Bobby Witt Jr. So that's why I don't get in on that. But what would be nice is if Lindor is the faller, and he's likely to be the guy that falls because Story's got new big buzz. Tim Anderson is big on stolen bases. Wander Franco, the next big thing. Lindor seems to be the odd man out, and that's actually really good for that 40-50 range if you can swoop him up.
All right, let's get to another guy who's a riser for you this spring, Welsh, in draft boards.
I'm going with another young guy, Jeremy Pena. I don't know how many people are up on Jeremy Pena. He's a shortstop with the system. He was actually out here in the Arizona Fall League in 2019, I believe it was. And he has consistently bulked, gotten bigger. He's a Hulk out there, and the team loves him so much that they've given him the reins for Carlos Correa leaving. On the broadcast just a couple days ago, I was watching, Jeff Bagwell was just oohing and awing about him, where they were hitting him up high in the batting order. I don't really truly believe they would do this, but they're talking about even potentially letting Jeremy Pena lead off occasionally. He's a really solid contact guy. He's got completely underrated power because just people don't understand or really know about Jeremy Pena. And if you're hitting high in that lineup, you kind of can't deny the value that might be there from the shortstop position for a guy like this later in drafts. And I think I've seen a lot of people picking him up late. Just as perspective, in 2021, Pena in only 145 at-bats had 10 homers with 6 stolen bases, hitting 297 in the minors. And he has hit over 290 since 2019. He's gone through 4 levels of the minor leagues. He's 24 years old, big 6-foot shortstop, added power. I think he could sneak into 20 homers there. He'll steal some bases as well. Astros don't steal bases, so we'll kind of see how that goes. But if they're really going to put Kyle Tucker back in the order and not lead off Altuve, and Pena's going to get some of that run, this is a guy who through his spring, he's been successful, and the team has talked him up, and they haven't filled his position. So Jeremy Pena, super good, sneaky late shortstop to pick, and he has moved up my draft board to really pay attention to, because we would be drafting him as more of a middle infielder, and he might be worth it.
I can tell you right now, if he gets to the top of the order in April, I'm going to be very interested in the DFS world in him, because he's going to be a lot cheaper than a lot of the other guys at that position, and hitting at the top of the order is always something you want to target in those. So I think that's a great name to throw out, not just for season long, but also for DFS purposes too. So Welsh threw out a young guy. I'm going to throw out an old fart. Normally it's good when you lead the league in home runs, except when you're a pitcher. Patrick Corbin last year gave up 37 of them. Not good. He also led the league in earned runs given up, 111. Patrick Corbin is such an odd career when you look at it, because if you go back to some of those Diamondback days, you know, the years where he's going 200 innings back to back, right? Back to back seasons in 18 and 19, the ERA was under 3.3. And then all of a sudden, right, he goes to the Nationals, has a good season there. We think, okay, you know, 238 strikeouts. All right, this is the guy we want, Patrick Corbin. Then 2020, the wheels fell off, 4.66 ERA, and then last year, I mean, he fell out of the car. I mean, if the wheels fell off the car, he was like Fred Flintstone, kind of like trying to put it together with his feet, which I know that's an older reference for some of you out there. You could go Google it, but I mean, last year he was 9-16. I know we don't pay attention at records, but it's just funny. So he led the league in lost games, he led the league in earned runs, and he led the league in home runs given up. It's not good, but he is free, and so far this spring, 9 innings, 10 strikeouts, 2 walks. So I don't know if it's a health issue the last couple of years with him. I don't know if it's a confidence issue. I don't know what it is. Well, but as a free pitcher towards the end of drafts, if you're going to give me a healthy enough Patrick Corbin, who could even get dealt, as I'm sure Washington's going to just continue to unload assets here this year, he could end up on a much better team sometime in July or August. If that happens, you know, right now, the spring performance has been eye-opening to me, and I always like to look at this. You know, those bounce-back guys are just as important as the young, sexy guys like the Rodriguezes that we talked about before, the Scoobles. Sometimes it's the old fart guys, too, that people have kind of dismissed and forgotten about, and if he can get back on track, this is a guy, once upon a time, Welsh was one of those guys you looked at as a 1A kind of ace in fantasy baseball, and I know the Nats aren't going to win a ton of games, but I think as a free square, I'm investing. What do you think about Corbin potentially bouncing back?
Yeah, this is another one of those guys. You picked another one that I like as well. 2019, he had 14 wins with an over 10K per 9 and a 3 ERA. He actually had 3.5 xFIP in 2019. In 2018, he had a sub 3 xFIP, which is bonkers. I mean, literally, his xFIP was better than his ERA. The problem is the guy's a 2-pitch pitcher. And if you get inconsistent or you're not fooling anybody, you're not going to work. And that's where he's fallen apart. It's the same thing we've seen with Chris Paddock with the Padres, where, you know, I know he has tried to add a third pitch and I think it was the curveball and trying to get more, you know, guys, you have to be able to set up more. And when you're a 2-pitch pitcher, you don't have a lot of that, especially if your fastball is flattening out or you're not getting spin on it, you're not commanding it. And all guys are going to do is sit and wait on your secondaries because they know they can catch up to your fastball. And that's a lot of what we saw with Patrick Corbin. But I'm in because this team can't get out from under the pitching because of the contracts. They also, even though we talk about them maybe blowing it up, they're kind of still in there and still competing. And if the pitchers were to work, I think it would get them back in. That Patrick Corbin's a guy that I think can get back into double-digit wins. I think he can regain the strikeouts. We're kind of seeing it in the spring, which I think is encouraging. And the most important part is he is free. He's free with only 2 years removed of 10+ K per 9 and lots of wins. It's not the same team, but I will take free 99 on Patrick Corbin, and I'm in.
He's free like the MLB draft kit over fantasypros.com/kit. See what I did there? Yep. So I've got Patrick Corbin. I've moved him all the way up into the high 60s here. He's in that same range as like Casey Mize and Luis Patino. Would you take Corbin or one of those younger guys?
What were the
in a redraft league
said? Patino or Mize?
Yeah, Luis Patino and Casey Mize.
Yeah, they're all in the same tier. I might, Patino, you know what? I would have said Patino, but he's been like a little bit banged up. I don't know. I might take Corbin. Push comes to
I think I might take Corbin. I've got Corbin ahead of them. Again, that's the order right now. I've got it Corbin, Patino, Mize, and then, you know, some guys like Alex Cobb floating around there too. Well, that's a bonus one we're not going to talk about, but I'm sure he's flying up, and rightfully so. If he's touching 97 on the gun, coming off a good year in Los Angeles, that's another bonus guy that wasn't on our lists, but almost made mine. But I just think I'll take my shot on the guy who's thrown 200 innings more than once. That is the key, what I get.
And that's actually the really important key there is he's going to get massive amounts of innings. They're going to rely on him all year long. I don't think they can get out from the contract. You hope he doesn't have 16 losses again this year, but I don't know. It's kind of a scrappy team.
I'll take the 16 losses if he gives me a 10K per 9. He gives me a mid-3s ERA. I'll take that. That's fine. You can lose all those games you want. All right, let's go to the last guy on the riser list for you. Welsh, who you got?
If you're talking about who are the guys during spring that have helped their cause, I'm not sure there is a guy that's helped their cause more than Jesus Luzardo, who's former top prospect. I absolutely loved him with the A's, and he really fell into inconsistency, which is so interesting because that is a lot of what he was built off of. Luzardo, multi-pitch pitcher, lots of different pitches. He could command the zone, but one of the things I loved about him, he's a very off-kilter pitcher, so he would normal pitch you, and then second pitch in, he might quick pitch you. Like he gets the ball and just bam. And then he might do a hold his foot motion and then pitch. So he would keep guys off balance. He's a really smart pitcher with multiple good pitches and became completely inconsistent. He lost a decent amount on his fastball. He's risen his average fastball I know one of the starts, and my buddy Chris Clegg had tweeted about a couple of these things. You've seen him, put almost 3 miles per hour back on his fastball, hitting the high 90s, and jumping in and throwing the curveball more than the fastball. And that really sets up, because if you are throwing 99 and everybody has to sit on that curveball, you're going to get strikeouts. It's just the type of success a young pitcher, that's actually kind of like a 27, 28, 29-year-old type of game I would think they would be playing. This is a really smart game plan for him, and I think it's going to lead to success, overpowering with your secondaries, and then just punch out, high on the fastball. And him adding that type of velo, that speaks for itself. That's not even a spring stat. That is just result. And we don't always need stats to, make us come to our decisions. That is a simple result that leads to probably him being a guy that not only need to target, but we've talked about the cheat code guys. He's a RP. He's going to qualify at relief pitcher for a lot of places. So if you want to sneak in that, throw him in there. So Luzardo's moved up for me.
All right. Love that one. Love Luzardo in those leagues where he might qualify at RP and SP. That's huge, especially in those mandatory spots there. So I hope he gets back on track, because I'm like you, Welsh. I was somebody who was absolutely in love with the talent in the Oakland system. And then it just...
He's not free anymore, which I don't like. He was free before. He's much less free. He's really risen up boards. So I will say this, I'm not willing to overpay for him. And a lot of other people, buzzy names, people will pay whatever the cost be. Even the guys we've talked about. Well,
he's consensus 273 overall right now. Pitcher number 83 on the board.
That's great.
That's pretty good.
But
that's
I've seen him go I've seen him go into the 200s.
Here's a question for you. Would you take Alex Cobb or would you take Jesus Luzardo? Because they're pretty close to each other right now in terms of the expert consensus rankings on FantasyPros.
You picked another guy who's had a lot of good velo changes as well.
That's
with the Giants.
That's why I put it out there.
I would take Cobb personally, but I'm
think
higher
I would
on
as
Cobb.
well.
I'm higher on
I also
Cobb
like
and
that
Alex
ballpark.
Wood. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I'm the same mind as you. All right, last guy for me that's a riser, Mackenzie Gore, having a wonderful spring this year. He's taken the ball 3 times, 9 innings so far, 11 strikeouts, 1 walk. If you go look at the minor league track record, over 55 minor league starts, he's got a 3.28 career ERA. Actually, got a 2.85 career ERA. Pardon me, I was looking at the wrong number there. The 1.106 WHIP. The guy's striking out 11 per 9. This is a guy we've been hearing about for ages now, it seems like, and just haven't quite cracked that rotation. We thought he might get dealt in one of these deals moving back and forth, but Mackenzie Gore right now certainly looks like a guy that should get a shot at this rotation. Clevenger did start this week. It was not a great start. Clevenger said, I always stink in spring. He hasn't pitched in a very long time, so there's a chance maybe that Clevenger's working behind everybody. I'm not exactly sure how many starts we're going to get out of Mackenzie Gore this year, but I think you're going to get enough to invest in him. So I've moved him up my board a decent amount, still kind of after some of these other guys because of the unknown factors a little bit. And he is still a young pitcher, so there's still some limitations. But when you're looking at Mackenzie Gore, where do you have him, Welsh? And what are your expectations for Gore in 2022?
I am not with everybody else on this. And I loved Mackenzie Gore back in 2017, was at his first pro start. One of my favorite pitchers. I had him at number 1 forever. But over this last 2 years, he's really kind of fallen apart a little bit as who he was. Saw him in complex.
He was terrible in the Arizona Fall League, by the way. I don't know if you watched him. There was a 70 ERA there. It was awful.
He was.
I was gonna say, I assume you saw him pitch.
He played rookie ball out here. They kept him hanging at the complex for a while. Then he played rookie ball. Then he went to the AFL after. He's shown signs, but that's my problem with him. I believe he's a reliever, and I think he should be groomed to be a closer at some point. his fastball doesn't have the spin that it used to. He can't pump 97 inconsistent. He's got to pump closer to 94. He started throwing his curveball again, which I think has been more success, but his stuff is all right, and he has more confidence right now where he's hitting the zones, but I don't personally believe he's going to get into the second or third through the lineup, and that's going to hurt as a starter. So my expectation for this year, and maybe I'll be wrong, the Padres might trade Chris Paddock, and Nick Martinez is not an option, and they put him in, but I don't think there's a role for Mackenzie Gore to be a starter. I think he could be a spot starter. I think he's a kind of mid reliever playing a Garrett Crochet role. I think he'll find success. Maybe he'll be a starter next year, but I really believe the bullpen long term is where he's going to go. But I will point out, he has worked with the starters the entire offseason here in the spring. He's with Paddock all the time is where I usually see him. I don't see him hanging out with any of the relievers or anything like that. So they're going to continue to do it until they can't, but I personally do not believe he can. So I'm not on board with Mackenzie Gore.
All right, fair enough there. So those are our risers: Tariq Skubal, Francisco Lindor, Patrick Corbin, Mackenzie Gore for me. I would also throw Hunter Green into that mix as well, who's making the rotation, who, my goodness, I only had 8 keepers in this one league, and I kept him for like $3 because I was like, I feel like he's going to play this year a lot, and feeling pretty good about that one. So that's good. That same team has DeGrom on it, so hopefully somebody pitches for me this year. Oh, my God. All right, and then, of course, the Welsh has Julio Rodriguez, Chris Bryant, Jeremy Pena, Jesus Luzardo, and we threw in Alex Cobb in there too as a mutual one. All right, let's get to some of the fallers here for me. Number 1 was Lance McCullers. I mean, this is just easy, and it's injury related, spring performance when there's 0 spring performance and there's lingering injuries with a guy who's had injuries already. I love the talent. I was very high on him. If you asked me in January, I was like, I'm going to have all the McCullers this year. Hopefully shows up to camp healthy and we're ready to go. That hasn't happened. He's been a faller for me. I've knocked him significantly down in my rankings. In fact, I'm going to do another refresh of some of these rankings right before we finish this show, and I've just plummeted him. I just don't feel like we're going to get a Lance McCullers season at this point, which is very sad. So I'm just not touching him. I have him at pitcher 75 right now, but that might even potentially get worse. So he's a definite faller for me. Welsh, who is a faller on your list?
It's not as significant as that, and I don't want to make every single one of these about injuries, but Luis Castillo has kind of fallen for me. He's been some of the inconsistencies with the team. I'm really worried about the team context with him as well. Mm-hmm. Injury worries are out there. So I've pushed him outside of my top 100. And, he's one of those guys, everybody, perennially, everyone's like, ooh, Luis Castillo, he's going to break out. And he's inconsistent in seasons. He's got months of 8 ERAs, and then he finds it for a month and a half. He's the Javi Baez or he's the Adalberto Mondesi of pitchers type of guy. Like, he could be one of the best and he can completely fall apart. I would take him if push comes to shove, but I'm not interested in paying the cost for him. And, them decimating that team has moved him off a little bit. So Luis Castillo, number 1 for me.
All right. For me, another faller is Cody Bellinger. I was trying to be patient, give him the benefit of the doubt, Welsh, and I think that's a smart thing to do when you've seen players who have had monstrous seasons, right? I don't want to go and be the prisoner of the moment. I don't want to go and see a player who was once hitting 40 bombs and then have some struggles and all of a sudden say, yeah, that guy's toast, he's done. But man, I'm just not seeing anything in Cody Bellinger. He's getting $148 so far. I know he had a decent postseason where people started to get a little excited again, but the biggest one for me, Welsh, this spring, he's had 10 games, 27 at-bats. He's had 17 strikeouts in those 27 at-bats. Something's wrong there, and I'm just not touching him. I'm not touching him for whatever the ADP is. It was the discount of all discounts, maybe very, very late in a draft, but that's not going to happen. Somebody in your draft is probably going to take Cody Bellinger a little earlier based on previous performance, but Welsh, I can't help but get around the 17 strikeouts and 27 at-bats. To me, that's a huge red flag. What do you think?
The punchies, he calls them. He's like, that's what spring's for. You got to get the punchies out of the way. Yeah.
Well, he's getting them all out of the way. He's not going to have any left at this point.
He is. I am a Cody Bellinger disciple. I kind of defend him a bit. I definitely am a little bit worried with how bad this spring is, but to the same point, good or bad, you don't want to buy everything in. But seeing the amount of strikeouts and some of the changes he's done is a little bit worrisome. I think there's just a lot of playing around that's going on as well. Season comes, I think he's going to stop screwing around. He's going to stop messing with his swing, and he's going to get back to basics. The basics might be the problem, though. Here's what I'll say. I'm not with you. He has fallen. He actually has fallen a little bit because I think I was hyper aggressive. I will still draft him, but I like it now because he comes at a much cheaper cost because he was starting to rise up. There were some behind the scenes, a couple people I've talked to that had some good things to say about some stuff that Cody Bellinger did this past offseason that could help and could go to a breakout. It's not an application right now during the spring, but I am hoping that the punchies are out of the way and I can take him a little bit later.
Coming into this year, I feel like we had Yelich and Bellinger as like, okay, somewhere around like outfielder 25, you could take a shot on one of these guys. I'm not taking the shot on Bellinger there. Not even close. I mean, at this point, I'd rather be taking shots later on guys like Kirilloff, who we talked about a lot more earlier this week on shows. All right, let's get to another guy on your list, Welsh. Who you have?
I mean, it's just an easy. I don't need to go crazy into it. It's kind of like your McCullers. It's Flaherty with the injury stuff. He's also kind of had some of those inconsistencies of a good month, bad month. He's coming into the season on an IL stint. Do we really fully know the extent of some of these injuries? He just moved way down, and I'm less likely to draft him. I don't want to call him off my board, but I don't see a scenario where I draft him. So he's kind of plummeted down in the same McCullers range.
Yeah, that's fair. And look, injuries are important, especially when it comes to the pitchers here, that you have to knock them down. You can't always think everything's going to be rosy, and you can't say, well, hopefully he can get healthy, because we've seen this already. It's you're starting off at a deficit. You're already going to have to deal with injuries in season. If you're going to make investments, especially big investments on pitchers who are very talented, but are already hurt to start the year, that's tough. I mean, I think you're already putting yourself behind the eight ball, and it's not a place to be. Another guy for me that's falling down is Jarred Kellnick. Another one that I thought spring was very important for. 7 strikeouts in the 9 games in the 25 plate appearances, hitting just 200, 231 OBP. He's taken just 1 walk in those 25 at-bats. So part of the reason why I've been moving up Julio Rodriguez is because I feel really confident about that guy and the tools that he brings, and I'm still waiting for Kellnick to click. And it just feels like he's one of these can't miss prospects, but we see this happen, Welsh, sometimes where
they miss.
Maybe something was lost in translation. Maybe that first run of the major leagues really hurt his confidence, or I don't know what's going on with Jarred Kellnick. But if you look at the track record in the minor leagues, this is a very solid player. A lot of people felt a very polished player that would actually transition to the major leagues quite easily. And everybody was wrong about that. And until he shows it to me, I'm knocking him down significantly in my rankings. I just can't get there. I can't do it. To me, there's a lot of guys in the outfield that are suspect as you get deeper. And if I'm going to take somebody suspect, I'm going to take somebody that's got more of a track record. I'm going to try to take right now. I mean, you got guys like Jorge Soler, Adam Duvall, Jarred Kellnick. They're kind of in that same range. I got to be honest with you. I'll take some of the boppers that I know are going to crush batting average, but they're also going to crush dingers. I don't know what Kellnick's going to crush except my batting average. And I know they're committed to him, and I think that's great. But there's even guys like Tommy Pham and Andrew Benintendi where I kind of feel like they might be safer than Kellnick in redraft leagues right now. Welsh, what do you think?
I'm huge on Andrew Benintendi this year. Yeah, I don't reach for Jarred Kellnick. Some players have to learn adversity. I think Joey Dell was experiencing that. I don't think there was a lot of baseball adversity he was dealing with. Jarred Kellnick, no baseball adversity. He dominated at every level. The biggest adversity he faced was being traded to the Mariners. And these guys haven't experienced a whole lot of failure. And then you get to the highest competitive level where they're being challenged where they weren't being challenged before. And you're seeing major struggles. Some players don't need it. Wander Franco doesn't, failure is not an option. That's not something that is in his game plan of how he plays the game. Some guys do. And I think you're going to, and that's going to be the true testament. But, why pay up right now for the opportunity for him to get it fixed? Spring looks okay. He still looks a little bit beat. Julio looks better than him right now. So I don't disagree with you. I still believe in Kellnick, but he's not a draft target for me. I don't think I've moved him down a ton, but I really just don't prioritize drafting him.
I have him. I've got him right now in the low 70s-ish range. Like, if Michael Conforto doesn't have a team, the minute Michael Conforto signs, I would take him over Jarred Kellnick. Yeah. Here's a question for you. These guys I have clumped together. Kevin Biggio, Jarred Kellnick, Andrew Vaughn. Who would you rather of those three if you had to draft one?
Oh, Kellnick. Hands down.
Okay, so still Kellnick for you. All right, let's just get another guy on your list. Who you got?
Well, this is going to be an interesting one. I don't know if you saw my notes I put up here. I don't have a third one, I got to tell you, because of a trade that just went down, a huge trade, which has massive implications, and it was the guy that I had on this list. I had Craig Kimbrell. I watched Kimbrell pitch the other day against the Los Angeles Dodgers. It was Walker Buehler. Kimbrell didn't really look fantastic, I got to admit to you. He didn't look great. The White Sox kept talking about keeping him. They had not moved him. I didn't feel good about anything happening with Craig Kimbrell, and I put him on this list. And then as we were recording this show, Craig Kimbrell traded to the Los Angeles Dodgers for A.J. Pollock. It's a massive move. So I'm cheating because he's not on the list now, because that was the guy, and he jumps into that closer role. Blake Trinan is now the guy that... So that's my pick. Blake Trinan is the guy because he's no longer the closer. He likes to even be that high leverage guy. Kimbrell's the closer with the Dodgers. Skyrockets up, and Blake Trinan moves down. Also, an uptick to Gavin Lux, who I think might be able to take some of this playing time from A.J. Pollock. So Lux up, Kimbrell up, Trinan down. That's my pick, because I literally had Kimbrell as my guy.
That stinks for all those people who took Trinan early, especially after you felt, if you took him really early before the Kenley Jansen move, you felt like $1 million. You're like, I'm a genius. Only 6 days before the season to have this happen. That's crushing. All right, I've got one more on my list. Since yours kind of got stolen from underneath you, why don't you take another one here?
Oh, yeah. My last one on my list is Camilo Duvall, kind of in the same range. He's a guy that's moved down. He actually could still be really interesting to draft, I would say, because I think he will. Bogman's even said he thinks Camilo will lead the team in saves, and I believe it. But people are still drafting him pretty high. I always got on Bogman's case about doing it because there were no guarantees. They've said Jake McGee is the current closer. So from the perspective of falling down list, Camilo Duvall has moved pretty far down. Kapler, is he going to give away that job early, especially to a young guy? Doesn't seem likely. I think McGee is going to get the opportunity for quite some time here. So Camilo Duvall was another guy that over spring has moved down.
Welsh is going to hate me for this last one. It's Jesse Winker.
I like it.
I just think last year was a one-year wonder. I do. He's always been a good contact hitter in the minor leagues. Never had a lot of power. But to me, it's not even the spring performance, which if you want, I could give it to you. You want to hear the spring performance? 22 at-bats, .045 batting average. Okay? He's not hitting anything right now, showing no power, right? And on top of which, he's moving now to the Seattle ballpark away from Cincinnati. I just don't like this move. I think people are overrating him based on the fact that someone traded for him. He's a nice baseball player. But I'm telling you, if the power regresses and he doesn't have that same kind of run, he had a magnificent month of baseball last year, and that power was fantastic. And I agree. I was in that train going, okay, maybe Jesse Winker has turned this corner, and if he's going to turn it, Cincinnati's a hell of a place to sustain it. I'm just concerned that he can't sustain it. If he was crushing the ball this spring, maybe I would feel a little bit more comfortable, warm and fuzzy in my tum-tum about it, but I don't. And I don't like this .045 batting average in spring. Spring can get overrated, but when you couple that with a move from a great power hitting ballpark to a not as great power hitting ballpark, I'm not saying he can't hit home runs there, but Winker's been more of a contact guy than a power guy in his career either. Sometimes the lefty-righty splits too against pitchers have been less than thrilling with Winker in his career also. I think there's a lot more risk than people realize, so that's where I am. And
the only thing I don't like about it is where people are giving Brian Reynolds the pass if he's the funnest, coolest guy to draft on the planet.
He is.
They're the same player. Jesse Winker and Brian Reynolds are the exact same player, and right now Jesse Winker plays on an exponentially better offensive team. If Reynolds gets traded to the Padres, that's maybe a little different story. But I just feel like they're the exact same guy, and everyone loves Reynolds, and now everybody hates Winker. So I don't buy it.
Hey, this is good. Debate is good.
Right.
Difference of opinion, good. We shall see how this one ends up at the end of the day. But he is Team Winker. I am not. Now, we promised you at the beginning of the show a few little draft tips here to close things out as we're heading into the final draft season where we're giving you all the tools here at Fantasy Pros to be successful. We're giving you all the podcasts, all the YouTube stuff, all the knowledge. We have our own little cheat sheets and our draft strategy guides that Welsh put out, that I put out. Bogman put one out too. I think Clegg put one out there. I want to say Mayer probably put one out there also. They probably let him do something.
Yeah, there's like 4 or 5.
Yeah, they probably let Mayer. Yeah, Mayer, go do something. That's what they said.
Ryan Mountcastle somewhere on that list.
Ryan Mountcastle, I'm sure it's round 1, Ryan Mountcastle, round 2, Ryan Mountcastle, round 3, Trey Mancini, round 4, Ryan Mountcastle. Right, yeah. But here's some other tips that I want to give you. And the first one is draft good assets. And what I mean by this is, well, that sounds really stupid, but I think people get too hung up on trying to fill out their team instead of drafting core roster strength. If the outfield market comes to you, hammer that outfield market. If the pitching market comes to you, hammer that pitching market. Whatever the value is in the draft, over the course of the year, you can make trades, you can make waiver pickups. There's going to be movement in the league. Use your draft, especially salary cap driven drafts, to acquire good assets, because the more talent you have on your roster, the better your roster is going to be, and the better it will be over the long run as other things inevitably do happen, like injuries or missed time. I know they've changed the rules a little bit this year too, so the pitchers have to go in the IL for 15 days, position players 10, which is good because now you're not going to have that manipulation anymore that you had in the system the last few years. But I'm telling you right now, we know the inevitability is going to happen where you're going to lose players. Get as much talent as you can on your roster. That's what your draft is for. You'll fill out your team. Don't worry about it. It'll all work out in the end. Draft assets, especially in dynasty keeper leagues. Don't get hung up on positions so much or filling out your team. There's ways to get that done. Welsh, give me one of your draft tips.
Well, I just want to add in, I'm going to jump to my second one because I didn't read how you wrote yours, how you just said it. It's literally the same thing. How I wrote mine was don't stress about positions early, where people are like, ooh, I already got a shortstop. I mean, you just said everything, so I don't need to repeat it. But that was my take as well, is don't worry about going nuts about roster construction and getting the best players. Plenty of great players might take 2 shortstops in the first 4 rounds. You can make it work with middle and shortstop. You can do,
or even utility. If you've got great players on the board, take the great players. This is RPV 101. Create an advantage somewhere. Otherwise, you're just a mediocre team in the middle.
Yeah. So I'm going to move to the second one because I agree with that one and it's kind of in line with even your second one as well, but it's take closers with actual jobs. Like, there's a theory across the board, and you're going to kind of talk about it, of how you can treat closers. But at the end of the day, this is just a way of me saying, get your closers early that you know have gigs. You can speculate, and people will win. There will be winners early in drafts or in April and in waivers on guys that get some closer gigs and that you made it out of it. But you don't have to play the game if you get involved and you get Class A's, or you get Haters, or Hendricks, or Iglesias, or Craig Kimbrel's. You get those guys. Be the one that doesn't have to chase and doesn't have volatility and loses their gigs. Your roster construction will feel better, and you won't have to chase those saves later, which, again, some people can make it work. If you've got a plan and maybe you're going to go really heavy starting pitching and you're going to just go for cheap guys, you can do that. That's a solid pivot. But I prefer to get, especially in Roto, to get my lockdown saves guys this year that have gigs without question marks. So I'm not playing around this year, and I'm getting the top closers.
I was just in my head. All I kept thinking was, they took our jobs.
Took our
South Park. Yeah, they took our jobs. For me, it's don't overpay for mid-tier closers, whether they have job security or not. You can find a guy late on a bad team. Maybe it's a Gregory Soto or somebody else later. Saves are saves at the end of the day. Yeah, some of the ratios, blah, blah, blah. Saves are saves. And those jobs are going to turn over. They do every year. Don't pass on good quality depth in that mid, like 150-ish range for guys who may or may not be closers. It's absolute fantasy death. And my last one here for me is attack that 1A / high-end SP2 market this year. To me, that is a very profitable place to attack. It's that Freddie Peralta, Giolito, all the way down to, the older guys like Verlander and Charlie Morton. To me, it's okay to start your roster with 2 offensive players, even in a points league, and then just hammer this pitching market after that. Trevor Rogers, I think, is going to make a huge step forward. There's a lot of guys in this tier that I think have huge upside to perform like aces this year. So that's just more of not a general strategy. It's specific for 2022. Welsh, what's your last draft tip for everybody as we send them off into the weekend?
Yeah, you're going to be adults. We're going to send you off to college, and you're going to draft, and you're going to be all grown up. It's all grown up. Mikey's grown up.
All grown up. And Welsh and I are going to cry and have empty nest syndrome because we're so proud of you and how far you've come.
Pay attention to steals. I'm not saying overpay, and I'm not saying don't overpay. I'm saying pay attention to steals. Watch it as it goes along in the draft. Pay attention to the people that are doing it. You can get steals all over. I tend to, here's a nice thing about the top round guys, a lot of them steal, and I kind of want those guys because they're consistent. There's some middle guys that are going to get you stolen bases. Frankie Lindor. Pay attention. Later in drafts, do you have to overreach for Miles Straw? No, you don't, but pay attention. Andrew Benintendi, Ahmed Rosario. There's late stolen bases. Josh Rojas, even AJ Pollock steals. There are late stolen bases. If you get 1 or 2 core guys, you can easily find 3 to 4 other 10 plus stolen base guys as you move along in the draft. So pay attention to steals without going one direction or the other, and I think it's going to help you out.
All right. So we've given you all we can. The risers, the fallers. Next week on youtube.com/fantasypros, MLB leading off is going to start on Wednesday at noon. Be there live. Subscribe to the YouTube channel and click that little notifications bell so you know when we go live, so you can just go right there and listen on your lunch break or listen on the West Coast when you just get into work and tell your boss, hang on, I know it's 9 a.m. and there's a meeting, but Welsh and Joey P are talking baseball.
I got a meeting with Welsh and Joey P.
Yeah, I got an important meeting here with Welsh and Joey P. Everything else can wait. That's what you tell your boss.
Right.
Also, free stuff, fantasypros.com/kit. Our MLB draft kit is there for you. The ranks, the projections, the values, the printable cheat sheets. It's amazing. Everything that we've got there for you. The prospect articles too. If you're dealing with Dynasty, we've got that also. So make sure you get in on that for free at fantasypros.com/kit. And then the draft assistant with Sync, as Welsh was saying, how is that guy gaming the system? He's using the right tools at Fantasy Pros. So make sure you upgrade to that MVP or that Hall of Fame subscription. And when you do, then you can go and take part in stages on Discord and all these other things. There's lots of perks to being in with the cool kids.
I'm going to be doing a stage. I was supposed to do a stages this week, by the way, but I got sick and kind of a cold. So I think it's going to be pushed, but I think I'll be doing my first stages next week. So just FYI.
They're so much fun. It's like a call-in radio show. You can talk about your problems, your life problems, your team problems. Sure. It will help you out. But I'm telling you, this draft assistant with Sync, it hooks up to Yahoo, ESPN, CBS. It doesn't matter what you got. We hook up to it. And it gives you that insights that you need and the advantage you need every single round to know exactly what you're doing, how you're building your roster, the players to take, the players to avoid, and most importantly, when to take them. And that's at fantasypros.com/draftwizard. That'll do it for us. But the story of the game goes on. For the Welsh, I'm Joey P. We will see you next time, kids.
Thanks for tuning in to the Fantasy Pros YouTube channel. Don't forget to check out our featured videos. And while you're at it, make sure to follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Fantasy Pros, so you can get the latest news and updates to give you the edge you need in your fantasy league.